Hello, it's Annette Smythe here again from Annette Smythe Art and Crafts. Well, I promised I'd show you what I made with the pine cone that I picked up from my daily walk. So here's the pine cone, and the first thing I've done is taken out all of the little individual parts of it so that we've got these little shapes. Okay. Once we've got a nice pile of those, I'm going to pop the pine cone aside for another project and bring in my tag that's going to be the base of my piece. Now it's easy to build up a piece while it's still dry and have an idea of where you're going, so that once you start to get things in Powertex, you've got a rough idea of where you're heading. So at this time I'm going to be using the wood chip wallpaper, and I've cut it just so that it fits onto this top part of my tag here. And for the bottom, I've been into the shed and found some old hessian. This is really loose hessian, and it's really nice because you can get to pull it apart and make lots of texture with it. And that's going to be my ground on this piece. I'm not worried about it being too big, because once it's through the Powertex, I can scrunch it all up and give texture in there. Now on top of that, and I've just laid it out on a separate tag for ease of use, I've got my cardamom pods, which are going to form little bushes. I've got some corrugated card, which is going to make the base. These are all my little bits that I've taken from the pine cone. They're going to make my hedgehog's back. And I've got a little piece of tissue paper that I've wet and scrunched into this triangular sort of shape. I put a dot in it so you can see it's actually going to become the eye of the hedgehog. So that's how our hedgehog it looks like, just in a laid out scenario without any Powertex on. So let's go ahead and make our tag. As always, I'm putting a layer of Powertex onto the base of my tag. This time I've chosen to use the bronze Powertex, but you could use black or ivory. Just be aware, if you're using the lighter colours of ivory or white, you are going to get some see-through from the brown in the pine cone, but that will be fine because you're going to be dry brushing afterwards anyway. So just use whatever you have, whatever colour Powertex you've got at your disposal. And if you haven't got the Powertex handy, why not try doing this with some glue and acrylic paint? So I'm going to take my piece of wallpaper, and because it's quite thick, I'm going to put a layer of Powertex on the back. And now stick that onto the wet tag and put it into place. You've got a bit of wiggle room while it's wet. It doesn't matter if your base has already dried out, it will still stick. And now I'm just putting another layer on top of that to secure it all down and seal it in. So you'll notice I'm using enough Powertex to cover it, but it's not dripping and it's not gloopy. So now I want to put on my hessian. Now this has to be dipped in the Powertex, and then you have to work it through to make sure it's completely covered on both sides, but again, we don't want it dripping. These little bits that fall off we can use later to add further texture. So I'm dipping it once. Now because hessian is more whole than it is fabric, just go with one dip to start with and really work it through. So I'm giving it a good squeeze and pushing that fabric hardener through the fibres. Then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to check to see where the areas are that still need work. Now this edge here is a bit thicker, so I'm going to go back along there and give that another squeeze. But as you can see, I haven't had to put any more hardener onto it. Turned it over and checked from the other side. And now that it's covered, I'm going to lay it down. A little bit there needs a bit more. And just give it a push into place. Now this is going to form like my hedgerow for my little hedgehog to be sitting in. Now Powertex is also a glue. It isn't an immediate grip, so you do have to give it time to start to dry, and as it dries it becomes sticky. Now if you find you're sticking to it rather than it sticking to your piece, you can always use the end of a paintbrush or anything you have handy to push it down, because then it's not going to stick to your gloves. Okie dokie. So now I'm going to move on to the cardamom pods, which are going to be the little bushes. So I'm just going to pick those up and drop them in a spare little pot that I have. And I'm going to take some of the Powertex from my pot and pour it in. And then using the end of my brush, stir it round just so those pods get a good covering. And using the brush end of the brush, I'm going to pull those out and drop them in place where I want them. Now these look a little bit more covered than the fabric. What will happen is as they sit on the piece, the Powertex will sink down and hold them in place, and you'll be left with the texture of the pods on the top of your piece. So I'm now going to do the same on the other side. Put my cardamom in. A little bit more Powertex. And again the end of the brush to mix it round. And then these ones are going to sit on this side. And again, I'm going to use the end of the brush just to move them around a bit. Okay, so I'm now going to take the corrugated card, and like I did with the wallpaper, I'm going to paint the back of it. Pop it where I want it. Give it a push. And then paint the front. You notice that I'm holding one finger on it just to keep it in place while I paint. That's just stopping it moving around. And I'm just going to pull down some of those pods to soften that edge. And the same for the other side. And again, pull the pods down. Now in this piece here, this is where my hedgehog's going to sit. So I'm just going to make that a little bit flatter, just so he can sit on there. I'm going to start with the head that I'd already put into a shape. And just give that a coating. And place that on my piece. And now for the fiddly piece, taking all those little pine cone slithers, we're going to cover those and we're going to build up the hedgehog. But you need to start from the back and work forwards so that they overlap in the right direction. Otherwise it looks like his little bristles are going the wrong way. So now force dry this with a hairdryer, but be careful that you don't blow away the delicate bits here, the cardamom and the pine cone, or you could just leave that to dry naturally on its own. When it's dry, we'll come back and dry brush, put the colour back in. Okay, so now our piece is dry and there's no more liquid Powertex on there, it's all nice and firm. We're ready to move on to the dry brushing stage. Now, if you haven't dry brushed before, you can pop along to my YouTube channel and that's my Powertex, and there's a short video there showing you how to use the varnish and the pigments to dry brush. I'm just going to crack on now and dry brush this. I hope you've enjoyed this creative adventure. Join me next time where we'll be doing more things with seeds and pine cones. Bye now.